Hello, welcome back to another Exchange podcast and a lot going on. Michael, go ahead and say hello to everybody.
Hey, I'm glad to be back. I'm glad to have y'all listening. Hope you're all doing well and hope to have a good exchange, leave you with some good information for your week.
We were just discussing before coming onto the podcast. I was running a test run through everything. We were running the test run on the intro, running a test run on the screen. Everything was working fine, and at 12:05 when I go live, the intro doesn't work, and so I had to wait for a few minutes. That was the explanation for the moment of silence there. Sorry, it's 12. I mean, we live in a town where the city controls the monopoly on the internet. But anyway, it is good to be back. As we all know, I'm using a quote on today's podcast that actually came from Abraham Lincoln. The ballot is stronger than the bullet. Of course, then you can go online and find one from Malcolm X called "The Bullet or the Ballot." But we all know what happened last Saturday with the assassination attempt of the president, and we had wrapped up the podcast. I stayed in the studio for a little while after that. I was doing some studying and doing some different things, research on some different things, and then later that afternoon, I get home that evening. I get home. I get a text saying that he has been shot. I didn't see it, but saying that he had been shot and that he was going to be okay, which was good news. But yet, the nation was froze with seeing the blood on the president, and your mind always goes back to former assassinations and assassination attempts, and then it was after that he said that he was going to change his speech on Thursday night to bring, because, and he's right, unity. I went into the podcast and I even put comments there that he was changing his speech and the theme was going to be more about unity, which is exactly what we need. We need unity in this country because all of the rhetoric, all of the back and forth that is going on because for almost a decade now, this man has been compared to Hitler. He's been compared to every evil villain that the world has seen. It was only a matter of time until someone did what they were going to do.
Well, I mean, you've got news stations and politicians saying this man is the greatest threat to our democracy. He has to be stopped by any means. And then you've got Biden with his poor choice of words saying put a bullseye on him. But then he defended it. Well, I didn't say crosshairs. Like that makes it any better.
But it was the same thing they got onto Sarah Palin about because she had said something about bullseye.
Yeah. The thing is, when you say that he's an existential threat and that if something's not done, we're facing the end of our country as we know it. Even though the 4 years that he was president, none of that happened.
Mm-hmm.
But eventually you get some lunatic that will act upon it.
Yeah. And I do want to say as we're starting, if Michael's voice seems far off, we're trying to figure out what's going on we're running all kinds of tests. Hopefully everything sounds good. We'll find out later. We're live, but we are trying to get that fixed. We've been in a change as far as where we actually do our live stream. Because eventually the idea is to add video to this. All of that is coming. It's been a work in process, but we just stay consistent with coming here every week. And we want you to join in on the exchange. We call it the exchange because we want feedback. If you're listening to it, you enjoy it, like, subscribe, share, but feel free. I mean, you do not have to agree. Look, you don't even have to agree with my belief as a faith even. I don't care if you are communist or socialist. We welcome, because the reason that we're doing this is because I've been listening, and I heard a woman last Monday, I believe it was Monday morning, and she said that she had always been, her words, her self-describing words, was that she was a feminist, a man-hating feminist. And she said, I always hated what she called toxic masculinity, or what is often referred to as toxic masculinity. And she said, for whatever reason, she chose to watch the rally on Saturday. And that after he was shot and he stands up and he's doing the fist pump and he's saying, fight, fight, fight. She said, all of a sudden, masculinity made sense.
Well, I mean, think about if that had been Biden. You know, would he have had the same response? You saw a person who went through a horrific ordeal
Yeah.
immediately bounce back.
Yeah.
That's what I want in a leader, not someone who's disheveled or sinks away.
Yeah.
I mean, he, in fact, almost to his own detriment, was out there, you know, because we'll probably get into this, but some of the people guarding him aren't even tall enough to cover his chest.
Yeah.
You know, but that's how strongly he believes in his ideals and his movement. We really saw a strong man come out in the face of adversity. And I mean, you cannot get a closer brush with death than getting shot through the ear with a rifle.
Yeah, and there is Kimberly Cheadle is her name. Cheadle. She's the head of the Secret Service. And she said that by 2030, which is 6 years from now, by 2030, she wanted to make 30% of the Secret Service female.
Yeah, so this is probably going to rub some people the wrong way. But how do you defend a man who is 6'3" and 200 plus pounds,
Right.
with someone who is, you know, barely over 5 feet? So if you saw the women that, well, here's the other thing. I don't know if you saw, there was a whistleblower that came out and said that some of the agents that were there were not Secret Service. They were actually HSI, Homeland Security Investigations.
Yeah, because that's their job. Good grief.
Yeah. So they are not executive protection. They do not specialize in it, which is probably why you saw some of the poor performance.
Yeah.
You know, adrenaline does crazy things to you.
Mm-hmm.
And they always talk about your fine motor skills deteriorate. But here's the thing, like, I used to drive my wife nuts. I would sit there and I'd make sure my pistol was clear, you know, drop the mag, rack the slide, make sure it was empty. But I would holster it, and, you know, we used level 3 retention holsters, which means you've got the hood plus a button you've got to depress before you can draw. And I would do it over and over without looking. I would draw, present it, squeeze the trigger, reset it, and just do it over and over. And it drove her nuts.
Muscle memory.
But I didn't have to feel for my holster. I knew where it was. The problem is, you get people, the Secret Service is supposed to be the best of the best. Their counter snipers are trained out to 1,000 yards. I don't think people realize how far that is. You know, you're looking at, what, 3/5 of a mile?
Mm-hmm.
That's a long way to make a shot.
Yeah.
You are the cream of the crop. You're the best of the best.
Yeah.
I expect you to look as such. What we saw was not only a complete lack of confidence, poor planning.
Mm-hmm.
I would say it goes even beyond that.
Yeah, well, it does. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
But the thing is, women are there are women that are capable.
Mm-hmm.
But here's the flip side. Look up every major celebrity.
Yeah.
Just humor me, everyone who's listening. Google your favorite celebrity and look at their security team.
Yeah.
They
Oh,
will
yeah.
be gigantic men.
Mm-hmm.
They will not have women. Floyd Mayweather is a perfect example. Look him up. He's got these guys that are like almost 7 feet tall and 300 pounds.
And that guy's dangerous in the ring.
Yes. And Taylor Swift, name any celebrity.
I don't know
you want.
anybody would want to attack her, but I get it.
Yeah. But
Just
the thing is, okay, I'm 6'7", And I've worked with some really great women who are police officers.
Yeah.
But if their whole, well, part of their job revolved around providing protection for me, they don't come above my chest.
Right.
I need someone who's 6 foot plus, and that just simply doesn't make sense. That's not saying that they don't have a role or they can't do something, but you have to. The ends have to justify the means.
Right.
And you can't simply just say, I want 30% of them to be women when they may not be the best qualified for the position.
Yeah.
That's the problem. Policing has really had an issue with, trying to diversify. And I understand to an extent, but you have to have, especially in these circumstances, the best of the best, and whoever is best qualified.
Yeah.
Physical fitness standards for something like that, for that position, there are different. It's just like the military. There are differences between the requirements for men and women.
Yeah.
When I was in the Guard, we had a competition at Fort Chaffee, and not a single woman in our unit was able to make it over the walls.
Right.
So what I did is I took a knee and planted my foot so they could step off of my leg to get over the wall. But not a single one of them could make it over unassisted.
Yeah.
But not a single man had to have assistance. There are certain areas where we have to realize that there are physical differences.
Yep.
And there's no amount of wishing that will overcome that.
Well, I think there's still an ongoing fight over trying to get women in the Green Berets, Special Forces, Special Operations Forces. I still don't think any of those have women in them, and there's good reason for that. It goes it was in New York, the fire department. They tried to join the fire department, and they couldn't do the fireman's carry. And if you don't know what that is, it's where you throw someone over your shoulder, and you have to run with them or carry them. And obviously, part of your training as a fireman is you've got to do real life scenarios, and so these women could not throw over the dummies that you carry over their shoulder, and so they suggested, well, we grab them by the ankles and drag them. Well, okay, but you got to drag them downstairs, so you can't. That's not going to work. So specifically for things such as Special Operations Forces, Special Forces. And if you don't know what those are, Special Operations Forces are like your Navy SEALs and Marines. Special Forces are specifically for the Army Green Berets. But you've got that. Then you have, say, clandestine services where male strength comes into play heavily.
Yeah, well, I mean, there are always areas where women can fill in, but I still go back to the fact that you've got a woman who's a foot and a half shorter than the president, trying to be a human shield. And at the outbreak of the gunfire, I'm sure everyone's seen the pictures by now of her freezing behind the other Secret Service agents. She doesn't dive on the president. She's ducking behind everyone else.
Yeah.
It's a pitiful performance.
Right.
Poor planning leads to poor execution.
Yeah.
And I will go a step further. I truly believe that they were going to allow it to happen. I'll go that step because the Secret Service typically does a 500 yard diameter around the president or the presidential candidate.
Right.
They did not do that. They had what looked like a Pac-Man where they left out the roof. They said it was too sloped. It wasn't too sloped for the shooter.
Right.
Okay, so the fact that they didn't have anybody observing that. I mean, there's so many things that come into play. The fact that 7 shots, they say between 5 and 8. I've heard 7. Regardless, a shot got off.
Yeah.
Here's what I think. I think that they were going to let it happen. When it didn't go off as planned, they had to save face. They couldn't just sit there and let shots keep ringing out. I mean, and regardless of whether it was some conspiracy.
Yeah.
You know, like now it's fairly certain that there was CIA involvement with Lee Harvey Oswald.
Yeah.
Okay, there's really no debate on that now. Oswald had to go. Jack Ruby killed Oswald. Well, then Jack Ruby's killed. Like it's just shoring up loose ends.
Yeah, I certainly don't doubt that. I think there was something more at play than just a guy climbing on a roof. Everybody, including you, you called it out. I heard Dan Bongino call it out. Why was there not drones that was flying over the roof to see?
Yeah, well, and if you want a great perspective, Dan Bongino was a Secret Service agent for 12 years.
Yeah, for
the
both Bush and Obama.
The guy knows it in and out.
Yeah.
Here's the thing. Those kinds of institutions cannot become politicized because then therein lies the problem.
Yeah.
They will allow things to happen that they wouldn't otherwise.
Yeah.
That your job requirement is to potentially sacrifice yourself for that candidate.
Yeah.
And if you allow your political influence or your own preservation of life to step in, then you're no longer effective.
Yeah.
It was a gross incompetence, but I almost think it goes further than that. If you look at all the details, you know, the other thing I find concerning is the fact that one of the local police officers, they boosted him up so he could see what the dude was doing on the roof, and the guy, what's his name, Crooks, turns and points the rifle at the officer, who then falls down, you know, approximately 8 feet.
Yeah.
But why is there not a common radio channel? First of all, people in the crowd, 2 minutes and 20 seconds before he starts firing, they're like, look, there's a guy on the roof, he's crawling. He had been flagged as a suspicious person. They apparently pursued him. You're telling me that gangly little guy outran all those police officers? Like, what?
He was wiry.
What kind of debacle?
Yeah.
If you look at the totality of the evidence,
it doesn't make sense. Something's off. And I think we talked about this last week. I still believe that the raid on Mar-a-Lago was the first attempt.
Well, so Nancy Pelosi, look it up. Nancy Pelosi talks about how her party deals with people they don't like.
Yeah.
Her smear campaign. She talks about we say something and we say it to the media, and then when the media puts it out, whether it's true or not, we go, well, look, the media is saying it.
Yeah.
We latch on, and we run a smear campaign. Well, that's what they did with Trump.
Yeah.
Okay, they ran a smear campaign. Well, that didn't work. His popularity just went up.
Yeah.
So then we'll indict him. We indict him on everything under the sun, you know, in all these different states. And we just throw stuff at the wall and see if something sticks. Yeah. Well, once again, his popularity surged.
Yeah.
So what's the next logical step? I mean, it really doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that, you know, that's where this was headed.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And that is, you know, that goes back to the N. Atzeys and the H. Hitlers, whose names I won't say for YouTube purposes because everybody at YouTube gets their hearts broken. And by the way, guys, I think you're messing with our views. Quit doing that. But they say things because it was it Goebbels, I believe, who said that if you tell a lie long enough, that eventually it becomes the truth. And so, yeah, the media is definitely. I mean, it goes back to the debate that now they're all having a meltdown over. And Thursday night after the RNC, they were having a meltdown because Trump said he was going to be unifying, and there was one guy who wanted Trump to use a nickname for Joe, and he said, "I'm not doing that anymore," because Trump had said that he that he wasn't going to do that for the purpose of unifying. Also, too, he said that Franklin Graham had asked him to quit swearing and not to swear in his speech. And I thought that was great because I don't know if you saw, but when I saw Franklin Graham walk up there, I mean, the whole atmosphere of that RNC changed. I mean, there was an authority about him there. And that's what I try to say. That's what I'm trying to say when I say that the church has to be strong. Because you've got a guy like Franklin Graham who just walks up and everything about that place changes. And then there, you know, the point being is that when the church is strong, people pay attention. There's an authority. And something that kind of came to me, you know, people want to say, well, why does God allow certain things to happen? Why does God allow bad things to happen? Well, I want to show you something. In Jeremiah chapter 16, he says, the word of the Lord came to me. You shall not take a wife, nor shall you have sons or daughters in this place. For thus says the Lord concerning the sons and daughters who are born in this place, and concerning the mothers who bore them, and the fathers who fathered them in this land. Now, he says that to Jeremiah. He's telling Jeremiah, you're not to get married. You are not to take a wife. But in Jeremiah chapter 20, I believe it is, he tells them, he says, tell the people to get married. Tell them to have children. Tell them to have a family and build houses. And you say, well, why does he tell Jeremiah not to get married? Because he knew that for Jeremiah, it was going to be a distraction. But for the people, they needed to get married because God always has a plan. Now, watch this in Psalm 137 verse 9. God, the psalmist tells us exactly what happens to the people while they're in Babylon, because that's what this is. In verse 1, it says, by the waters of Babylon, there we sat down and wept when we remembered Zion. Then you go all the way down to verse 9, and it says, blessed shall be he who takes your little ones. And he's talking about Babylon. Let me just back up to verse 8. It says, O daughter of Babylon, doomed to be destroyed. Blessed shall be he who repays you with what you have done to us. Talking about the Jewish people. Blessed shall he be who takes your little ones and dashes them against the rock. What the Babylonians did is they took the babies and they literally beat their heads against rocks. And that's just what he tells us. There was probably other things that he did. And so people would say, well, why would God do something like that? After he tells Jeremiah what's going to happen. But then he tells the people of Israel. Why? Because God had a plan for what was going to happen. And that was that the children of Israel, or that the Messiah was going to come through the line of the children of Israel. And so we have, people want to say, well, why would God do something like this? Because when God sets a plan into order, and he said it way back, he said, be fruitful and multiply in the book of Genesis. But there's also, he says that a root shall come from the spring of, a spring shall come from the root of Jesse. And he's prophesying about Christ. You know, when you look at what happened on Saturday, people may want to try to take and say that was just, there are some people trying to say that Donald Trump set that up. People want to say that Donald Trump is a narcissist. What narcissist do you know that trusts anyone to do something of that nature?
I wouldn't. Oh my gosh, the audacity of people to say something like that. You literally cannot have a closer brush with death.
Yeah.
Think about how close your ear is to your actual brain.
Yeah. If they were going to take a shot, you would think they would fire over the head, not through the. And a narcissist is too. They are too paranoid to trust someone to do something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. I wouldn't trust someone to do it, even the best trained people in the world. If you pulled that shot, no one is infallible.
Right.
You cannot count on. What if the wind blew he allegedly used an AR-15 firing a .223? What if that gust of wind carried the? You have to understand that most likely was a 55 grain projectile.
Yeah.
It's really subjected to the wind, and the greater the distance, the more the wind will affect its travel.
Yeah.
But I'm not taking that chance.
Well, he was 130 yards, which I heard a SEAL sniper say. He said it had to be God because no one's going to miss at 130 yards.
No, so typically the term you'll hear is like that's a 1 or 2 or 3 MOA gun.
Yeah.
To try to break that down in layman's terms, if it's a 1 MOA rifle, it should shoot a group. Like if you shoot a 5-shot group, it should put all the rounds within 1 inch.
Yeah.
If it's 2 MOA, then it would be 2 inches.
Yeah.
So most military rifles are probably like an M4 or well, not the M16 is slightly more accurate. It's got a longer barrel.
Right.
But let's just say an M4 because that's probably closer to what he's using.
Yeah.
Somewhere between a 2 and 3 MOA gun. What's the size of a human head? It's roughly
About the
8
size of
by
a
10.
watermelon.
You know, if you really have your rifle dialed in, that's not an incredibly difficult shot to make.
Yeah.
Especially when you're firing 7 rounds.
Yeah.
I do think that God absolutely had a hand in it. If he hadn't have turned his head at that very moment, we would be talking about the assassination,
Yeah.
not an attempt.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, I mean, I know for me, I mean, I shoot my AR-15 at 100 yards. I can hit the head no less than twice.
oh, well, so Army basic training, you're training to hit a man-sized target out to 300 with iron sights.
Yeah.
You know, that's
And that's what I'm shooting with is iron sights. I'm not even shooting with a regular.
yeah, and I just there's no other explanation.
It was God. Well, that someone brought up about the fact that the wind had maybe blown it off trajectory, and I think the woman was on Fox News, and she said, we know what that wind was. She said that was the wind of the Holy Ghost, and of course, you know, I mean, it would have, but at the point, you know, there was a minister there. Gosh, what was his name? Give me just a minute. I'm going to try to pull this up because his name is Lorenzo Sewell, and he's a black minister out of Michigan, and he made this. He said, "I'm going to tell you the difference between providence and sovereignty." He said, "Sovereignty is God doing what He wants when He wants because He's God. Providence is God doing what He wants when He wants because He's doing it on behalf of you, His people." And he, you know, he was really just building up what had happened and how that God had protected President Trump. And that's what, you know, I mean, that's what I'm trying to say. I mean, even though God was sending the Jewish people into slavery, He still tells them, He says, "I know the plans I have for you, plans to prosper you and to do good." This is why I believe that Trump will win. I personally, because he didn't escape an assassination attempt, I don't believe to lose. I think, and I'm not blaming any group of humans here, they're not smart enough or powerful enough or calculated enough to pull it off. But they can be used by the power and the prince of the air, which is Satan, to do it. And I believe that all the powers of hell are fighting against him. I'm not saying he's saved, but I am saying that he is the vessel right now that God is wanting to use. And I think, I want to say this before I just pass it back off. I think if the church, and I pray to God, we understand the moment that we're in. I think that the embers of revival and awakening are beginning to be blown by the wind of the Holy Spirit, and we need to be ready for that to happen. I've been talking about awakening on this podcast and other churches I go to speak, and other places I go to speak, and I'm telling you, something is awry. And please, if you are a Christian listening to this podcast, please do not miss this opportunity. Don't look towards Him to give us this economy that's going to be strong, and I pray it is. But don't let that be the thing that short circuits and shortcuts you. Understand that this is a moment for the church to rise up.
Well, I was going to say, you know, a close brush with death, and you don't get any closer than having the part of your ear blown off.
Yeah.
Really changes your perspective. And
Yeah.
Trump has talked about his faith in Christ, but I hope that this situation, out of the bad comes the good.
Yeah.
You know, what the enemy meant for evil,
Yeah.
God will use for good. I'm hoping that this will really enlighten him and change his perspective and really make him double down.
Yeah.
And get closer. And like Franklin Graham said, you know, stop cursing in his speeches. Like, well, but I mean, you know, you.
No, I was glad he. I was
You
glad
are
he
the
did.
representative, potentially, of the American people.
Yeah.
And there's a way to speak eloquently without
Yeah.
resorting to that.
Yeah.
I am really interested to see how this plays out as far as his world perspective and his walk.
Yeah.
because you cannot be that close to something and not have it change you.
Well, I loved Lorenzo Sewell, what he said. He was one of my favorites. He was my all-time, one of my favorites of the week. And then Franklin Graham, and both of them did what I was looking for someone to do. I was hoping Trump would do it, to be honest with you. But they both did. Number one, they were giving absolute glory to God, and that was going on a lot. But Pastor Lorenzo Sewell and Franklin Graham both boiled it down and narrowed it down to what it is. It is a national sin that must be repented of, and it's not a sin of slavery. It's not a sin of systematic. Those are sins. It is a national sin of a nation that has gotten off track and has forgotten the purpose that we were founded for, going all the way back to Plymouth Rock, when they founded this nation to spread the gospel to the rest of the world.
Yeah, well, and we as a nation have fallen off so bad. I mean, if you look at the people that were touting and pouting about how you were so close, and you had what's his name, Jack Black's bandmate from Tenacious D,
Oh yeah.
that said, don't miss next time.
Well, I would go all the way back to Johnny Depp, who said, "When was the last time that an actor assassinated an American president?" And that went all the way back to, I think, 2016, 17 sometime.
Yeah, we have to, on both sides, have to get away from that.
Mm-hmm.
We need to be able to have a civil discourse and disagree without wishing harm upon the other.
Yeah.
I don't agree with Biden.
Yeah.
I don't agree with the decisions his cabinet or his handlers have made.
Yeah.
But I don't wish death upon him.
I don't want to see anything bad
I
happen. to him.
don't want to see anyone.
And I'll be honest with you, I'm going to go on record saying this. I pray for him every day, because I'm going, okay, and I don't think this is a national thing, but the man all of a sudden gets COVID. It's like, okay, Lord, because anything that could be done to try and do harm to anyone, but especially a sitting American president or a former president, is not going to be good for the nation.
No, I mean, he's still at the reign of control of this country.
Mm-hmm.
For better or worse, I still don't want to see him flounder.
Right.
I don't believe that he has done a good job. I don't believe that he's unified the country.
Yeah.
If anything, I think he's become extremely divisive.
Yeah.
But I still harbor no ill will.
Right.
And the problem is, it's become an us versus them mentality on both sides.
Yes.
And it's overshadowed the humanity of the people living here, where you don't value human life. You see them as a threat, and as such, you feel indifferent to the killing or violence, and that's not appropriate.
Right.
It doesn't matter whose side you're on.
Yeah.
It's not appropriate to wish that your political enemies were dead. I mean,
Right.
you're going back to National Socialism and communism and all the things that have failed.
Yeah.
Because that's exactly what the process they went through.
Now, I will tell you something that Christians can pray. If you're wondering what you can pray, no, we do not pray against people, and we do not pray for destruction of people. I know people say, well, they did in the Old Testament. They did. The Old Testament, New Testament, we're serving the same God, but we're under a dispensation of grace. But there is something here out of the Old Testament that is great, and we can do. And this is going back to a story. If you go to 2 Samuel chapter 15, Absalom, who's David's son, King David, sets up a conspiracy to take the kingdom. And he starts undermining his dad in every way. And he's telling me, saying, yeah, my dad understand. He listens to your plight, but he doesn't understand, and he doesn't care. If I were king, I would care. So he steals the kingdom. But the Bible says that David is going to mount to the Mount of Olives, which is amazingly enough, because we had a men's breakfast and Bible study this morning, and we were talking about geographical locations. And this Mount of Olives just happens to be the place where Christ is going to come back at his second return. But David goes there. And they would go to the pinnacle of this Mount of Olives to pray, right? So it says in chapter 15, 2 Samuel 15, verse 30, but David went up the ascent, which is the pinnacle, of the Mount of Olives, weeping as he went, barefoot and with his head covered. And all the people who were with him covered their heads, and they went up weeping as they went. And it was told David, Ahithophel is among the conspirators with Absalom. And this is what David said. And David said, O Lord, please turn the counsel of Ahithophel into foolishness. Now, what does that mean? Yes, confound those around him that are advising him, because they are doing things that are not good for the nation. They are doing things that are not good for Israel. We're seeing that right now with Israel being attacked. So it is okay to pray that the counsel is turned into foolishness or confused, and things that they would counsel, they don't counsel. Things that they would not counsel, they will counsel for the good of the church, the good of the nation, and the good of Israel. We can pray that. And that is not praying for danger. That is praying, confound the counsel and confuse it so that they don't do anything that would be a detriment to Israel, the church, and the nation.
Absolutely. The Bible is very clear that you are to pray for your leaders regardless of whether you agree with them or not.
Yeah.
We've lost sight of that. Like I said, it all comes down to you're on that side, I'm on this side, and we can't find a middle ground.
Right.
The problem is, like I said, you start to devalue human life when you approach it from that point of view.
Yeah.
Are we going to disagree about things? Absolutely. But the thing is, this is a constitutional republic. Okay? We are a republic that has a constitutional document that outlines what the government is and is not allowed to do. Whatever is not clearly outlined in the Constitution is left up to the states. We need to understand that just because someone has different ideals or different values doesn't mean that they don't have any worth as a human being. And we've really seen a sharp upturn in the devaluing of the opposing side.
Yeah.
And that doesn't just go for left or right. We need to understand that, we're not going to agree. You and I won't agree on every single thing, but we have to find a way to reach some common ground. There's far more that unites us than divides us, but we focus on those issues that divide us to an extent where we overlook the things where we can come together or compromise. Now, there are some things on which I'm not willing to compromise. I believe it goes against what Christ commands us to do, and I simply, there is a line and it is drawn. But I think that we need to focus on the commonality of the American people, and really focus on coming together. Because I really truly believe that had it been successful, we could possibly see that. I mean, I think we're primed for a potential civil war. If you take away the popular candidate from one party, it's no different than the Lincoln assassination.
Yeah.
You could see some turmoil that could have potentially come out of that.
No, absolutely. And I kind of want to segue into another topic, and that was Thursday. President Trump made his speech. Thursday evening, beginning in early Friday morning, we had there was a cyber breach of some sort, and come to find out, so it didn't affect any of the Mac OS, iOS platforms or anything of that nature. It affected all Windows products, and there was a lot of conspiracy that it was China who may have been behind it. I don't believe that it was China. I don't think China needed to do it, because in 2016 there was a company that came to notoriety. It was founded in 2011 2016, it comes to notoriety. And the reason it does is because Donald Trump was the first one to call out the name. The name was CrowdStrike. And what happened there was the Democrat National Committee paid the company to investigate a hack of its server, which it determined emanated from Russia. Okay, so CNN Business is the one who reported this back then. Okay, and the company was the first to publicly sound the alarm about Russia's interference in the 2016 election, and CrowdStrike's assessment was later confirmed by U.S. intelligence agencies. So CrowdStrike has been, ever since 2016, has been behind really trying to bring all of this stuff against Donald Trump to keep him. They were used as election interference in 2016. Come to find out, CrowdStrike is the cybersecurity company that is behind all of these servers that went down on Thursday night. I had a brother who was driving from Missouri back to Arkansas, and at night, he said it was a good thing that he had cash on him because he stopped at a gas station and none of the pumps were working, couldn't use a card, nothing. And so he said that he was glad that he had cash because that was the only way he could get gas for his car. So they are they're a huge cybersecurity company, look, it is more than just a coincidence that everything goes down after the speech is made on Thursday.
Well, there's no such thing as coincidence.
Mm-hmm.
The older I get, the more I look at the world. There is no such thing.
Yeah.
Things happen for a reason.
Yeah.
You have to look at the intent behind
That's
it.
right.
But, excuse me. So you have to look at what happens when they're trying to push this whole cashless society, and then somebody cripples the system that you use to pay. I mean, that's a prime example of why we need to retain the ability to use cash.
Right.
So what happens when we become a cashless society and somebody hacks it or purposely downs it? Then what do you do?
Right.
We're in dangerous territory, and people don't realize that they like the efficiency or the ease of not having to use cash. But then you run into these issues. So what happens when you're extremely low on gas and the only way you can pay is cash?
Yeah.
You're stuck.
Now, what CNN tried to say is that basically CNN in their own little spin tried to say that CrowdStrike was behind, that they were covering for Trump, but that is not the case. And when you link everything together that's there, at the time the FBI director was James Comey, and so the FBI looked into this CrowdStrike thing in order to try to figure out Russian collusion. So it only stands to reason that history is repeating itself. So what we're beginning to see is now the narrative because after I watched the convention on ABC News. And after the Thursday night speech, I mean, all throughout that week, they were all happy. They were all giddy because something changed about Trump. Something did change about him after the assassination attempt. And then he came out and said he was going to bring more unity. And they were hoping, I think they set him up, is what they were trying to do. They were trying to bait and switch. They were all happy because he was talking about unity and bringing everything together. And so then when he comes out and he doesn't attack Nancy Pelosi, he doesn't attack Joe Biden, but he does call out their incompetence. Immediately, all of a sudden, well, that was a lie. He lied about this. He's not being honest. He said he was going to unify, and now he's going back to his old tricks of attacking. No, he was doing exactly what he needed to do, but he set the bar up, calling the Democrats out, saying, "Look, you guys have got to stop calling me a Hitler and a Nazi, and I'll stop calling you Sleepy Joe. And let's work for the good of the American people."
Yeah, well, the thing is, how do you demonstrate the changes you would make without pointing out the flaws of the administration you're running against? I don't see anything wrong with saying, well, here's what they're doing, here's what I would like to do.
Yeah.
because otherwise we're all just robots and it's monotone and everybody's like there is no change. The American people are tired of the current establishment and they're looking for a change. You have to outline what you're going to do that's different from what's being done.
Yeah.
And so I don't see anything wrong with that. Now, the name calling and all the other childish stuff that has gone on, I genuinely think we will see an attitude shift in Trump post, the assassination attempt, where he really sits down and kind of has a, for lack of a better term, come to Jesus moment. I think you will see him shift. But, the other thing I would tell people is, like I said, they tried to smear him, they tried to indict him, now they tried to kill him. He must be on the right track. He's threatening just the right people.
Yeah. Well, yes, and see, what happened is in 2016, the FBI admitted that CrowdStrike was the one who gave them the information about the dirty dossier and all of the stuff that
That was all made up.
that was all made up. Well,
Which is how they justified all their FISA warrants and everything else. It was on false pretenses.
well, on Friday morning, CrowdStrike comes out. And again, CNN Business covers this. What is CrowdStrike? The company linked to the global outage. Everything. Banks all over the world went out. So my question now is what information is floating out there about everyone? But how, like you said, there's no such thing as a coincidence. What is getting ready to hit the headlines about President Trump and the convention that's going to be made up? And you know it's going to be made up.
Well, like I said, I'll see if I can, post a link to the interview where Nancy Pelosi talks about their smear campaigns. She said that they'll flat out put disinformation out there. It doesn't matter if it's true or not. But once the media latches onto it, then they go, well, look, it was quoted in the, take your pick, any of the media companies, and then they'll run with it.
Yeah.
Same thing keeps happening over and over. But
Yeah.
I think the wool can only be pulled over people's eyes so many times before they go, hey, well, we've already seen this before. Like, they realize, people are starting to realize that this is all a farce.
They are, and that's why that they know they're in trouble. That's the reason why that everybody's saying that Biden's going to step down and resign after this weekend. And I heard one theory, and this may be right, that come the Democrat National Convention, which is in 4 weeks, that there will be basically a runoff primary or whatever they call that, but it'll come down between Gretchen Whitmer, Gavin Newsom, and Kamala Harris. And one person said basically what he thinks is going to happen is they're not going to be able to resolve between those three, and then ascending from on high will come Michelle Obama. I don't know about that. I do think she will. I do think she will. And the reason I think she will is because they're going to have an excuse for why they're not running a woman of color. And if they bypass Kamala, or however you want to say her name, Kamala Harris, they're going to have an excuse why they're doing that, because otherwise it's going to be made that they are. And so here comes Michelle Obama, the woman of color, the woman of their dreams. Boom.
Yeah, I think that's an accurate assessment. It could occur. I mean, we'll find out soon enough.
I don't think it'll bode well for them, because historically that never does.
Well, here's the other thing. Their party is in a pickle regardless, because you've invested so much time and money into a candidate who has absolutely fallen flat. Then, only sheer months before the election, you're going to try to switch candidates. You've got to pump the money now because you're not going to have the money in the coffers. And you're going to have to try to promote, run ads. Like, they're really in a bad position regardless.
Mm-hmm.
It's quite evident that Biden can no longer do the job.
Yeah.
The thing that really perturbed me was, well, the president's, quite with it from the hours of 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. Okay, well, what happens when, something happens outside of that?
Well, I mean, do you not remember? Was that which election was that? Who do you want? Who do you want when the 2 a.m. call comes at 2 a.m.? Now, I know that was Hillary Clinton who ran the ad, but I can't remember who it was running. It may have been it was either McCain or it might have been when Trump was running in 2016.
Well, I mean, look at Benghazi.
Yeah.
She got the call, and we all
Didn't
see
answer?
we all see how Benghazi played
Yeah.
out. I think that regardless of the circumstance, that they're in trouble, and they
are.
realize it.
They are. Well, that's what I'm saying. They had the meltdown on Thursday night after that because of the fact that what they saw was the whole "Make America Great Again, Make America Wealthy Again, Make America Strong Again" was a very positive, effective message, and they weren't attacking anybody. The Democrats are going into theirs without any message whatsoever because they've got a guy who they can't get to step down, who they know and they've known since day one. This guy's faculties are gone, but they're going to run him.
But they shot themselves in the foot by
No pun intended, right?
By allowing it to play out for so long.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's been evident for quite a while that he was deteriorating, but they just kept propping him up.
Yeah.
At a certain point, you have to realize and cut your losses and move on. But they've created this facade, like this like there's nothing wrong. He's as bright now. He's as strong as he's ever been. That's an outright lie.
Yeah.
And they built their whole house of cards.
They forget YouTube exists.
Yeah, they built their whole house of cards. Well, now it's collapsing.
Yeah.
It's biblical. A house divided cannot stand.
Right.
And they've divided themselves and created quite a catastrophe for their party.
Yeah.
Which I do not agree with a lot of their stances and ideals. So I'm not terribly upset by that. But I still worry about the future of our country. We all have to live here. I don't want to see it deteriorate. I want to see America be better. We always tout ourselves as the last bastion of hope for the world. I want to see that prosper. I want to see that passed down. I don't want to see us flounder regardless of who's in the White House or who controls the House or the Senate. I want what's best for America and for everyone living here.
Well, you go back even in go back to 2 Kings, and you get a run of about 2 or 3 kings, maybe give or take, where that they decide this guy has served his purpose, and they just kill the guy and set up their own kingdom. The moment that a country slips into that, you are slipping into it really is. It is the fact that they are moving away from a faith, because that's exactly where Israel was. Israel was into idolatry. They were into all sorts of things. And it's where America, we have found ourselves. And so go back to the JFK assassination. Go back to the Lincoln assassination. The country was in turmoil in both cases. So the moment that that they start trying to assassinate a leader, Rome did it towards the collapse. That's the reason why that I'm saying, if look, the Bible tells us that looking to a man is a curse. While I want President Trump to win, because we know what he did from 2016 to 2020, you don't have to like him, but you can't deny what he did. And while I want him to win, I also realize that we cannot, as the church, we cannot afford to allow ourselves to fall into a place where we're looking to President Trump as being the person that's going to fix this. It's not. It's going to be God who fixes it. And we're going to have a faith in God.
Yeah, you cannot place a man above God.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of danger of this. I don't know the best term for it, but almost like cult-like mentality, where the be-all, end-all. He's fallible. He's still a human being. He makes mistakes. While I do think he's a better candidate, and I think that the party more closely aligns with my beliefs, I don't place my faith in him over Jesus. And that's where people really have to be careful.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's what I said, because the Bible tells us, it says that we cannot, to place your faith in a man is a curse. This is why that when the Antichrist rules, it's going to be a curse, because people are going to put their faith in him. We have to place our faith in God. And while that is, I pray that he gets in. I also pray that the church does not allow itself to fall into that place where we look to him, because that is what happened in 2016. Things were going great, and the church just kind of slacked off and backed off because everything was going so good. And I just got a text, thank you, because we got a bunch of noise going on in the background that we typically don't have, and I don't have control over that right now. And so I do apologize for that. But the church has to remain strong. The church has to always keep in its focus that our job is to lead people to Christ.
Well, your job doesn't change whether things are easy or hard. That is irrelevant. Sometimes you gotta double down when things are great, and sometimes you gotta double down when they're terrible.
Yeah.
There is no, if you're not moving forward, you're moving backwards.
Yeah.
If you're not going up, you're going down.
Yeah.
So there's no excuse to not push.
Yeah.
The economy doesn't determine your salvation.
Yeah.
And it's great to live in a good economy. It's great to live in a country where things are going well. But regardless, your salvation, your promise, your eternal life don't come from it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so don't ever lose sight of that.
Right. No, and that is the key thing, is that we as the church always remember that our goal, Jesus gave us the Great Commission. And just like I mentioned about with Jeremiah, God tells the children of Israel to continue to have kids, knowing what the Babylonians are going to do to them. Jesus even tells his disciples, he says, I'm sending you out among wolves. And he tells his disciples to go buy a sword. So he's not against us defending ourselves, but he gives us the Great Commission. And go study the lives of the apostles and how they died. All of them except for one, John, died cruel deaths.
Oh yeah, well, and they tried to kill John.
Yeah,
they boiled them alive.
That's exactly right. And at the rally, they lost the fireman. I don't even want to try to pronounce his name. That was a big debate. The fact that his name was misspelled, but the thing was, the fire department had actually misspelled his name on his coat, and they sent them the actual coat that he had set up on the stage. That's when you know the other side's losing, is when they start to nitpick at things that are ridiculous. But anyway, he lost his life. And you can ask yourself the questions, well, why would God permit? I don't know, other than his sovereignty, and he's not being cruel or mean, but he does have a purpose, and God does not deter his purpose because of our feelings.
No, I mean, you're absolutely right. Oftentimes, we find ourselves in the Job mentality, as I call it. I find myself there going, why does this have to happen to me? Why? I mean, I can't get up unassisted. I have a hard time feeding myself. I can't bathe myself. Why?
Yeah.
But then I'm reminded, what was God's response to Job? Where were you when I set the heavens and the earth, when I created everything?
Yeah.
God has a purpose and a plan for everything.
Yeah.
I have no business questioning his playbook.
Well, questioning is one thing, expecting the answer is the other. But what I love about Psalm 137, if I read that whole thing, what you find is that the psalmist, even though he describes what Babylon does to the children of Israel and to their children, to their babies, he never, ever blames God. Job doesn't blame God. The psalmist here puts it exactly where the blame begins. It is evil people that are doing this. It's not God doing this to them. And when things happen to us, we've always got to remember, it isn't God who did it to us.
Well, so evil, sin was introduced into the world. And the way I look at it is it's kind of become compounding or exponential.
Yeah.
Once sin crept in, you started to see that, what is the wage of sin is death. And so, it's appointed to all men to die.
Yeah.
We all live in a fallen world.
Yeah.
Bad things happen to good people. It's just the nature of the world we live in.
Yeah.
But God's still in control, and
Yeah.
ultimately He still decides what happens.
Yeah.
And when you can place your faith in that, it doesn't matter what happens
That's right.
here. And if you know you've secured your eternal life, it's irrelevant. And as crazy as that sounds, this life is but a fleeting moment.
Yeah.
You have an eternity to look forward to. Do you? For a lack of a better term, Turner for Turner.
Well, and something that I just saw here that I thought there was a limit that you can give to a campaign.
Honestly, I'm not familiar enough to know.
Because Elon Musk has pledged $45 million a month.
Yeah,
That's a lot of money.
180 million. But there was also a billionaire. I can't remember his name now. A billionaire hedge fund investor that has pledged a large sum to Trump as well.
Wow.
People are coming out of the woodwork.
Well, that's what I was getting ready to say, was that there was the assassination attempt on Saturday unified the country. People realized just how much we need to unify. And that is what I got to give kudos. I don't care if you like or dislike the guy. This whole convention, for the first time that I can remember ever since I started voting and watching these conventions, for the first time the Republicans had one where it was one solid message. There was nothing there that there was absolutely nothing there that I can say was bad. There's a few things I'd have done different, but I can't say it was bad. And he, the message was unity, because they realized we've got to have it. You've got to have unity. And that is really where he's, that is where this was going. But, I'm going to, again, one other thing, if you haven't listened, go listen to Pastor Lorenzo Sewell. Go listen to his speech. He just laid it out. And one of the things that he said was, and I'm going to end my part of it on this. He said, the providence versus the sovereignty. Sovereignty is God doing what He wants when He wants, because He's God. Providence is God doing what He wants when He wants on behalf of His people, because they're His people. And on my end, that's what I want to leave you with this week. Michael, what do you got?
Well, so I want people to focus on what unites us, not what divides us. There are certain ideals that I hold on to that I'm unwilling to compromise, but that doesn't mean that I can't have compassion or try to understand where someone else is coming from. And it's our job to try to bring them to Christ. Instead of going down to that level, we try to bring them up.
Yeah.
And I think that a lot of times, especially in politics, it becomes mudslinging, name calling.
Right.
And we see what that's done. It devalues human life.
Yeah.
And we have to look at how we can unite as a country, because the whole is stronger than the sum of its parts.
Yeah.
We need to really do some soul searching. And if you think that assassination and death and all this is the appropriate answer, you really need to look at what's going on in your heart.
Yeah.
Because it's not the answer.
Yeah.
I think that there's a lot of things that are at play. I think that a lot of things that Trump has said have really ruffled feathers within what they call the
deep state.
He wants to end the war in Ukraine.
Yeah.
We've sent hundreds of millions of dollars.
I don't know what the call was, but he said yesterday that the call between him and Zelensky was a good call. So that may have been CrowdStrike too. They're going to try to say that there's.
Oh, good grief. But, you know, you have to look at why they're doing what they're doing.
Yeah.
Why are they so fervent in coming after him?
Right.
And once you look at that, you can understand better who's pulling the strings and where they're coming from. But as I always say, look at things from a critical perspective.
Right.
Look at who stands to gain and what they
Yeah.
stand to lose,
Yeah.
and you'll understand why things are.
That's right.
Why human nature plays out the
Yeah.
way that it does. But don't place your faith in human nature. Place it in Christ, and you'll have that peace that surpasses
Yeah.
all understanding.
Again, this has been a great exchange. If you like it, if you enjoyed it, like, subscribe, and share. YouTube, quit messing with our views. We know you're doing it. We're keeping an eye on it. You don't have to disagree with it. Just allow it to play. See you next week.